work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it.
And we're experiencing roughly 400 emotions a day. Leadership is not necessarily highly transferable if we don't pay attention to content. It's just this flow of energy and humanity of people supporting each other.
In today's fast-paced, often burnout inducing work environment, is it even possible to create workplaces that truly energize employees? My guest today, Dr. Rob Lyon, says absolutely. And he's here today to share how. So, Dr. Lyon, you advocate for a human-centered approach for leadership. Can you elaborate on what this means and how it differs from traditional leadership models?
Sure thing. Yeah. Thanks, Jason, for having me. And this is a great question, because when you live in a space, you forget that this is maybe what you know, and you don't. So I think back to, the old days, the former approaches, which are still alive but not too well in organizations, such as this concept of you can't be vulnerable with your teams, right? You need to be tough. You need to be gritty. You need to set your direction, and they need to fall in line and follow. And that's what I did. And they need to do the same thing. And what we're learning is just the workplace has shifted, that people have so much choice in life. And I think what's come along with that choice, and I'm talking about just like, just something as simple as quality of food, types of foods, types of experience, types of entertainment. They've grown so much over the years that we really can be curators of our own experiences in many instances. And then you add on remote work on top of that. So now I can work for a company in New York, even though I'm living in the mountains, and it enriches my experience in a different manner. So I think it's very important to recognize that adage or that approach of vulnerability as a weakness is still around, but it's not serving us well. In fact, one of our tenets at Black River is that vulnerability does not equal weakness, right? Because when we think about it, what builds the best quality of relationships? What helps people connect with one another better? And part of that is grounded in vulnerability. How can we have trusting, loving relationships with significant others, or even trusting, respectful, dare I even say loving relationships in the workplace with others, without opening yourself up and sharing kind of your own humanity? And that's what we're really focusing on here, is kind of tearing down these barriers and these beliefs that are still lingering. We're trying to help leaders recognize that they are just merely a part of the team that might have a different job title, maybe some different responsibilities as it relates to that. But there's not a whole lot of benefit anymore of keeping your people separate from you in terms of what you're experiencing emotionally, what's going on even in your own life. Now, we don't need to overshare, but we do want to help our teams understand and recognize that I'm fudging through it also, right? So you think about COVID, you think about all these different things. And one of the common things that we do with teams is we do emotion check-ins, which, I've run into organizations like, whoa, 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 we don't talk about emotions. And that's an approach. But for a lot of our people, for all of us, let's just be clear, we're experiencing roughly 400 emotions a day. And so it's kind of ignorant for us to kind of operate outside of that. So it's really empowering to a team. So especially if we're thinking of young leaders, new leaders, how do I bring my team on? How do I integrate them? Part of that is helping them understand that you're a person too, and that you have needs and issues, and that you are mindful of what they might be going through too. Right. And so one of the most powerful things that occurred with our teams that we worked with during COVID was when that leader, and this still continues today after that, that leader takes pause in the staff meeting, does an emotion check-in, and says, you know what, I feel like we've been grinding. How are you all doing? And if you have that trust and that respect, people are going to feel more free to share those emotional reactions. And then that's a good litmus test for that team. At that moment, do we need to press on with business, or should we do a little bit of a check-in for 10 minutes and just say, hey, yeah, we've been grinding for 2 months now. This project's almost done. I know it's taking a toll on some of my own life outside of work. I'm not sleeping well. How's everyone else doing? and just spend that
Right.
time. And it's almost like a form of therapy where you get to bring to the surface frustrations, a little bit of discontent, a little bit of overwhelm. And then you realize, wow, other people on this team are experiencing similar things. And I'm not alone. And that's pretty cool that we're on this team together. And you know what? If anything, I feel even more energized now to press on. Let's get down to business, right? And so that's just a quick overview of that. But we try to integrate that humanity and that humanism in interactions throughout the day with different people so that, and it's not just all about emotions and pieces like that. What I'm saying is that, look, we're giving more time to work, more of our waking hours to work than anyone else. And so if we're working 8 to 10 hours a day, that leaves only maybe 8 hours of discretionary time when we're not sleeping to do stuff. And then you stack in, well, I got family obligations. I volunteer for this. I coach little league. I have to get groceries. By the end of the day, how much of that time is really yours, right? So,
Yes.
so we're in some instances coming home just beaten up and run down. And I believe what I truly believe and I aspire for is that I want my team to go home at the end of the day with that fuel tank half full still, adequately full so they can be present with the things they want to do or the people they love. Not just sit on the couch and let the kids mind their own business, but actually be there with them if that is what they want to do. Or if you want to volunteer, have the fuel in your tank to go volunteer. Or maybe even get to the gym, right? Like it's hard to get to the gym at the end of the day when you're
Right.
worn out, feeling beaten down. And so I believe that we can prioritize both profit motives as well as culture motives at the same time by taking a very mindful, informed approach to how we are going to support each other, be there for each other. And so this talk starts with engaging the entire team in the process, but also a little bit more of a bolstered approach with leadership because people only know what they know. And many leaders lead based on how they've learned to lead from other leaders, both good, bad. They might have disliked this from one leader, so they're going to stay as far away from it as possible, which may create other problems in this context, in this environment, right? So leadership is not necessarily highly transferable if we don't pay attention to context. And
No, I love that.
what
Yeah, and one of the things that you have, and I know it's a core principle for Black River, and it's a philosophy, and it centers on the idea that work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. And this is kind of what what you've been speaking about. But when you say human spirit, and I know we can get into the fuel part and the draining part, and that's the practical part. But from a philosophical standpoint, what are you viewing a worker with a human spirit?
That's a great one. So to some extent, that's defined by self, right? And
Mhm.
but how I look at it through a partially philosophical, but partially psychology based lens, right? We know that there are certain needs in humans that drive their well being. And that concept of spirit, in my opinion, my soul, my spirit is tied to my well-being. And at some point, if my well-being is not stable or healthy, my sense of spirit and soul is going to erode over time. And that's the challenge with workplaces. Some workplaces don't prioritize well-being. And I'm not saying like gyms on site, things like that, and well-being programs. I'm thinking about this a little bit more holistically and understanding what do people need? Really simply to flourish in life, people need three different concepts. They need competency, the ability to do the job correctly, consistently. And that's just not at work. That's in their personal life also. They need autonomy or agency, independence to have decision and agency over how they work, how they act. That's why micromanagement is such a problem. We
Mhm.
remove agency from people. And this is once again true in the workplace as well as home. And then we need connection or relatedness, both in the workplace and at home. And that one's a little bit different. It's a little bit more fluid and it flows back and forth between the two. But these are the three basic psychological needs that humans need for high quality levels of intrinsic motivation based on the science. And so, what I believe is through better understanding such things as these principles, as well as other things that we look at, we can self assess hey, how am I doing? Why am I feeling off today? How am I in the competence area, the autonomy area, the relationship or the relatedness areas, and really start to diagnose where we're at we'll have a better sense of where the things that are creating problems in our life are coming from. And I love the work you've done on all these different podcast episodes that pull in these perspectives of self-awareness and all these other things, right? And so this is almost precursor to that, that if I understand what makes me essentially human and I can navigate that and work to navigate that in my own accord, I can then go into these other things and explore those further. But what's even more important when we think about our leaders that we're speaking to here in many instances, how do I start to get a handle on this to help my people? Because if I can better understand this concept of motivation and self-management myself, that's the first step. Now let me build that bridge to bring this into the workplace. So now I can be there for Jason and just, in addition to that check-in that we had that morning, I follow up later with this little bit of education in the psychology and behavior aspect. I say, Jason, you good? You want to chat? I'm available. And just leave that door open. And I believe it empowers you to say, hey, look, back of my mind, I trust Rob. I know he has my back. And you know what? Maybe right now I'm not ready, but as soon as I am, I'll let you know. Boom. It's beautiful. Like it's just this flow of energy and humanity of people supporting each other and
Mhm.
being together. Because at some point, screaming and yelling, like those old concepts of just drive, 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 you might hit that mark, but you're gonna lose the team in the process, and then you're gonna be hiring a new team, and that's gonna cost you in a different way.
Yeah, and one of the things that when you're talking about like not drain the human spirit, I mean that's the old style of leadership. But as a leader, when you're in the trenches, especially like a young leader or middle management, we have a lot of those leaders listening to this. You get so frustrated with the overwhelm and then the lack of caring or the lack of accountability, especially in our line of work on the tech side of things. What are the biggest obstacles that leaders face when they're trying to, that they're listening to you and they're saying, Rob, this is awesome. I don't want to drain anybody's human spirit.
Right. Yeah.
What are what are the biggest obstacles they face in trying to actually boots on the ground and
Yeah. So a couple thoughts that come to mind. One, in many instances, our leaders that are above us in those instances don't really have a sense of it either, right? They're not
yes.
understanding what it is. I'm
Mhm.
working on this formula right now to start to articulate this. At what point do I have to embrace leadership as a part of my identity as a leader before I start actually living that? The other piece that I think about is, especially with young leaders, and so it's a slippery slope in my opinion. So we want to get as educated as much as we can and learn. But what we have to be really aware of is just because I've listened to Jason's show for 2 years and it's great content, it doesn't mean I'm there or even close. I might have some ideas. What's
Right.
the relationship between those ideas and my actual skills to accomplish these things, right? So it really does speak to the importance and value. Like if you're a serious young professional in a good industry, you got some good financial support, professional development funds, find a good coach, like a high quality coach that's not just teaching you and telling you, but will actually help you develop the skills and that align with your values and your beliefs and your priorities to accomplish this, right? The other thing is what the biggest factors, I think, one of the biggest factors is the lack of the language to understand what it is that I really don't know. Right. So
Yes.
it's
That's so
hard
good.
for me to ask my boss questions about what I essentially don't know. And a good reflection of this is that when people say, look, I don't get paid enough to do this, right? Or I'm not recognized enough to do this, that's code for something that has nothing to do with compensation or
Mhm.
recognition, but they just don't have the language to accurately express their frustrations they're experiencing. It's just that's what's available and they go to that. So trying to surround yourself with other people that can actually help you get over that hurdle and and clear it consistently is very important. But if I can add one thing that I would actually recommend to your leaders listening to this, I think the most important leadership attribute that nobody's talking about is consistency.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
So, and what I mean by that is, look, if I'm consistently kind or consistently a jerk, either way, if we have good culture on our teammates know how I'm going to react before they approach me with good and bad news.
Yes,
I hope
yeah.
you're not consistently a jerk, but you know what I mean? Like, I hope you're consistently fun, lighthearted, engaging. But I've seen people, if people's like really swinging in their emotions at work and they're leaving the group feeling uncertain, I don't think that builds a lot of confidence in the leader. In fact, I know that does it. And I see people withholding information because they don't know how to approach it and how it's going to work out for them. But I've also seen very crunchy leaders that are a little bit more of a cold style, still compassionate, that, you know, their people are very comfortable to go to them to give them that bad news or, hey, boss, I screwed up, or this is what's happening, or here's some good things, because they know how that person's going to respond. And I think that's so important for developing leaders to practice that consistency.
I love that, and I kind of want to shift gears real quick. When it comes to leaders cultivating their own well-being, I see so many leaders and they're drinking 20 monsters a day. They're on the hookup culture with Tinder. They're working 15 hours a day. They may even resort to, drugs and
Yeah.
alcohol as something. And now they're sports betting, because a lot of leaders have this addict type personality. How do you cultivate well-being and at the same time effectively leading and supporting a team? Because you got to have some type of self-care.
Yeah. Yeah, and it starts with you as the leader, right? So, what is that energy and that mood that you're pushing down to your people, right? Are you talking about betting your sports bets, your sports book over breaks and things like that? Is that's becoming a part of the small talk? Like I've worked with organizations that are like, look, I'm not down with this exclusive group of the team always going to play a round of golf on Friday and get trashed when I'd like to golf, but I don't want the rest of this, right? So it's being a
Yes.
little bit more aware of what else your people want. Now, there are actually tools that can help us with this too. I was talking about this last week at a conference that there are some psychometric tools that we use as we hire people to help determine, hey, look, are they more inclined to value this or that? And that's one way to help with that. But I really do think that as much as I've said be vulnerable with your team, you also have to be mindful that what is it that I'm casting out as the standard for those
Yes.
people? Because I may not realize it, but some people might want to be like me. You know what I mean? So, oh, they never gambled before, so they're going to start, sports betting now and try that out. And all of a sudden, they're in
Yes.
a world that might not be as fun, but they're stuck in it, right? And so, I think there's some really valuable opportunities to have these open conversations of what's a part of our culture, and what does that look like, and let the team define it itself. Who knows? You might have a group that says, "Look, this is truly what we're about, and we like to drive hard, grind, 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 hit those monsters, like you said, have a lot of fun on the weekend, and then do it again during the week." And the concepts of being young and being able to do that's exhausting to me at this point, right? But
I say
but that might be functional for that team. I
yes.
don't think it's
Yes.
sustainable. I think that's
Right.
when we run into problems, especially with our VCs and funders starting to look in and go, wait, whoa, 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 where's the well-being here that's stewarding these funds that we want to accomplish X, Y, and Z before the next funding round, right? So to me, it's about bringing your team in to be a
Mhm.
part of that decision-making process in terms of where we're going. And maybe these are different than monthly staff meetings. Maybe these are quarterly check-ins for start, stops, and continues that relate to both individual, team, and organizational priorities.
Yeah, it's almost different with like especially with millennial leaders that everything that's popular on social media is kind of like the hack. You can go against this and do this. Here I am. I'm 32 years old and I'm living in Bali, and it's all that's what it's out there. Where I'm 51, so it was back in the days. It was like work hard, grind, grind, grind. You're going to have a hardcore boss that's going to push you. And you're going to work 6 days a week. And you're going to be successful. And hopefully, eventually, you can retire. The biggest mistake new leaders often make and don't even realize they're making it. What does that look like to you? What do you see, as an expert in leadership? What do you see whether there's one or two, the biggest mistake?
Not knowing what they don't know and the fear of asking questions. And this is a part of the
Yes.
onboarding
Yeah.
process. So here's another kind of quick tip. here's a hack for young professionals that get your people onboarded right, right?
Yes.
And don't know how to onboard according to culture, not here's their benefits onboarding, here's the handbook.
That's really good. Yes,
Yeah.
according to culture. On board according to culture. That's so good.
Because what we want to start to do is normalize certain behaviors. And for me, if I was onboarding a new professional, you know, their ego might think they know everything. I kind of make it clear to them that you know a lot and I hired you for a reason, but you also don't know everything. And I'm here to be a part of that journey. One of the things that helped me the most were my hands-on supervisors that made sure that I was onboarded, integrated well. And as my competency increased during that time, their hand holding started to taper off. So what we're trying to do is create this understanding that, look, just because you graduated from wherever and you got this degree and you got some great chops, there's more to this job than just you. And so I'm here to be a part of your integration into this organization so that you don't burn yourself out, you don't burn the bridges, and I'm here for you. And let's reach out and have conversations.
I love that. And Dwayne, we always asked, to have one pre-submitted audience question. And the question was a two-part. What advice would you give to aspiring leaders who are just starting their journey? And then the other part was, what's the biggest mistake new leaders often make? To sum up this in conclusion, because I want to take some time to get into your work and what you're doing and your website and your podcast, what advice would you give to aspiring leaders? Like someone's that wondering to dip their toe. Because a lot of times you've known this, maybe the sales performance was through the roof. They're a lone wolf. And because their performance is so great, they're offered into a leadership position, but they have, pardon my French, they have no freaking idea what to do. What advice would you give if somebody's like teetering on that? Should I be a leader or not?
Boy, there's a lot. That could be a whole show in and of itself. It's how do you negotiate the terms for that, right? Because too many in that situation that get promoted in don't have enough cover from their leaders to go from
Yes.
here into supervisors. So we need to structure that differently. I say go for it. We're seeing the data that says people aren't as interested in moving into leadership roles. And I get it. I understand why. Because we treated people like garbage in some instances historically. So
Yeah.
why would someone want to be saddled with that? But I also think it's a credible gift. It's actually a gift of a journey for you to go through of learning more about yourself. You know, for me, what was huge for me is I consider myself a Taoist. And as I was becoming a leader, I was learning about Taoism simultaneously. And it really helped bring pause to my life and
Mm,
recognize inherent beauty of all different things. But it provided a real balance to this grind perspective and hustle. And I found it super helpful. For my advice to new leaders is ask lots of questions. Maybe don't take yourself too seriously. You really don't know what you don't know, and remain humble. I was having a
mm,
conversation with someone this last week, a client, and they were talking about this other leader that, is taking all the claim for having a, killer sales performance quarter after quarter when it's just that their people are really working hard and that leader's really not adding value or removing value. They're just kind of there, right? But it's easy to be that person that's there and lose touch with really
mhm.
what is my role? How am I impacting others? Is this success mine or could it be better or different? And if I'm experiencing the success, these recognition of these sales awards, things like that, how does my team feel about these accomplishments? And am I adequately rewarding and supporting? Just because they're getting bonuses on the commissions, to me is not sufficient.
Right.
It's nice to them, but just like most people, we want to feel valued and appreciated. And, so keep an open mind as a leader.
I love that. Dr. Lyon, give us information on where we can find about Black River PM and more about you.
Okay. So I am available on LinkedIn. And so look me up, Rob, and last name spelled like lion, Lion, or Robert, and then Lion. And then our company, Black River Performance Management, is a little abbreviated in the URL. It's Black River, the letter P for performance, the letter M.com. We focus on all sorts of aspects of troubleshooting organizations, culture, strategic planning, high potential, high capacity employees, all sorts of things. We have a real broad service base because we love the inner workings of organizations and teams. We're not just hey, we do training on purpose, so that's what we do. I have people that call me frequently, and I call it the bat line, the bat phone, when they're like, "Hey, Ruff, I don't know how to handle this employee. What do I need to do to exit them, you know, kindly, or how do I put them on a performance plan, or what should we do with this team, or will you take us to Mexico with you for your next retreat?" Like we do all these things, so
Mm.
we love to focus on the people and help people thrive. So reach out, connect. You know, there's something on LinkedIn right now. You find it, posted something free 30 minutes. Just get in touch with me if you want to chew on some of these things and talk about these things and get to know us a little bit better. By all means, there's no cost for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Lyon. Appreciate it. And we'll make sure we have in the show notes all the links that